Okay, welcome everybody. This panel is really about next generation protocols. We touched on this earlier on about the problems of existing blockchains and how new protocols are coming on board. I'm delighted to welcome all the panel. We have some excellent technical experts here and people again that have been involved in the cryptocurrency space a long time. So on my left we have Maxim Postnikov, who's the chief evangelist at Universa. Then we have Mance, Harmon, who's the co-founder and CEO of Swirlds and Hashgraph. We have next Crystal Rose, who joined us just very recently, so delighted to have Crystal here. I think she's just finished her own token sale, so she's been a busy lady, traveling to lots of different countries. And we also have Preethi Kasireddy here, who's a blockchain engineer, and she previously worked at Coinbase, and she's now the lead blockchain engineer of Mercury Protocol. So welcome, everybody. Nice to meet you. I met nearly everybody yesterday. I didn't manage to meet Preethi, so really hope I've pronounced your name correctly. And very nice to meet you. I think we're going to run this panel slightly differently because there's so much new information about these protocols and most people don't really know that much about them yet or how they work. So we're going to kind of follow the panel down, I hope, and get each person to talk a little bit about their new protocol and just explain why they see a need for a new protocol, what's wrong with the existing systems that they're trying to fix. So I think as we organized it that Max was going to kick off for us.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me be the first one to speak. Is it okay? Do you hear me? Okay, thank you. So I want to talk about the future. But before we start talking about the future, we have to look back into the past. And let's start with the past of technology. In 1885, Carl Benz introduced the whole new technology. It was first world serial automobile. It was called patent Autowagen or something like that. It was legendary. Its impact on the whole world was great, but no one drives it now because, let's admit it, it is slow, it is uncomfortable, it even didn't have the steering wheel, some arm for that. So now we drive modern cars. Let's look at current so-called classical blockchains like Bitcoin or Ethereum. We should never underestimate their impact in the world we are living currently. But let's admit the obvious. They are slow, they are too expensive, and they are not really smart. And that's why we built Universa, a new generation blockchain protocol. I will not go deep into technical details, I just don't have time for that, but just some points. First, our speed. We can handle, at this point, 25,000 transactions per second. If you compare that to Ethereum, it has below 20. Bitcoin has below 10, you know it. Why do we have such speed? Because we don't store everything in one single blockchain for all. Instead, we have cloud computation, and we allow anybody to have its own private, secure blockchain in the cloud. Universa stores final states of contracts, verifies it. If you want to know more, you can always find me after the panel. We don't rely on a community of untrusted actors, so any random person cannot run a node. That's why then it comes to critical questions of privacy for enterprises or for governments. Governments can always rely that our distributed network is run by certified nodes. It is still decentralized, it is still distributed, but we have some kind of moderation opportunities. Then smart contracts. Okay, Ethereum smart contracts is what we have now, but let's admit, they are not really smart, and they actually are not contracts. In Universa, we have real smart contracts. First of all, it's contract. So if you show it to a lawyer, he can read it. He can actually understand what is it all about. It's not some solidity strings only. And our contracts are smart because they can be written in several languages like JavaScript, CoffeeScript, or even Scala. So basically, our smart contract can be a full-scale application. It can even have a graphical user interface, which is very important. Of course, we thought about money. You can, through Universa, you can tokenize any asset, and you can tokenize money. You can tokenize Bitcoin, you can tokenize any cryptocurrency, you can tokenize even fiat money, and make smart contracts with them. Our smart contracts can look not only inside the network, they can take information from the outside world. They can take information from your bank account if you allow that. And we are cheap. You know, Ethereum was planned to be cheap, right? But then the token price went up and it is ruined. We foresee that. That's why our transaction price is stable and it is 1 cent. For you can have 100 transactions for $1. And this stays the same. You still pay for transactions in tokens, but if token value is $1 million, you have a lot of transactions you can buy for that. The transactions are linked to fiat currency, not to tokens. Tokens are just way you pay for transactions. By the way, our token's still on sale for some time. And by the way, I can give you some free tokens. If you find me in lobby, I have these cards, and there's a QR code in that. So you can scan it and get your free tokens from me. So, but I can go for hours talking about Universa. I want to say one more important thing. It's not about Universa, it's about future. In our white paper, it is written that we promise to invest some money, and it's a pretty significant amount of money, in education. We are going to build educational centers all around the world to teach students how to work with blockchains. And we want our students to have a choice. They can work with Universa, they can work with Hashgraph, they can work with Neo, they can work with any new generation fast and secure blockchains. So we can't do it alone. We can, but we don't want to do it alone. And we want to form some kind of alliance or some kind of consortium. In my head, personally, I call it friendship. So my appeal is, guys, let's change the world together. Okay, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Max. I have some questions to ask you about Universa, but I'll come back to those at the end. So okay. I'm going to turn to Mance. Mance is Hashgraph. I heard about Hashgraph myself only a few months ago, I think back in the summer. It's not necessarily exactly a blockchain, but a different kind of distributed system. So I'll leave you to explain to everybody exactly what the Hashgraph is all about.
Okay, great, thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. So if you think about what Bitcoin blockchain was designed to do, it was designed to be a digital currency, a cryptocurrency. And when it was introduced to the market, it was a milestone in computer science in some ways. With Hashgraph, we started, actually Dr. Lehman Baird, my co-founder and the inventor of the Hashgraph, started under the assumption that we were going to create arbitrarily complex distributed applications. In other words, the requirements for the underlying consensus technology were far more stringent than what are required just to accomplish a cryptocurrency. Hashgraph is not a blockchain. Hashgraph is a fundamentally different data structure and consensus algorithm. It's a replacement for or an alternative to blockchain. Generally, it's an alternative to every other distributed consensus algorithm in the market today. There are only a few categories of those kinds of technologies. And Hashgraph is a fundamental advance in computer science in that for the very first time, it achieves two things. One, it achieves the bandwidth limit that is possible for distributed applications. If you have a distributed application, you have a bunch of nodes in the network, each running a local copy of a database. When transactions are introduced to the network, all those transactions have to go to all the nodes. That's the minimum required for bandwidth. With Hashgraph, we add a tiny amount of information on top, basically 2 hashes, if that's meaningful to you. And that's it. No additional bandwidth is required to achieve consensus. Secondly, there is a category of consensus algorithm that goes back 30+ years. We call it pure voting-based algorithms. These aren't practical because of their bandwidth requirement. It's just too onerous. That, the amount of bandwidth required for this category of algorithms blows up in terms of the number of, it doesn't scale well in terms of nodes and transactions. However, they have some fantastic security properties. They achieve the theoretical best that can be achieved for this category of consensus, distributed systems. It's something called asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance. No one in the market has it. There are BFT, or Byzantine fault tolerant systems, but they're partially synchronous or partially asynchronous BFT systems. And that partially piece of it, it's very meaningful because it means that we've made assumptions that aren't reasonable assumptions about the security of the consensus algorithm. For example, one of the common assumptions might be that botnets or DDoS attacks don't exist in the world. If you're worried about DDoS attacks, then the security is not sufficient. Hashgraph does two things, as I'd mentioned. It achieves the bandwidth limit, and it also is the first time that we have a system that is practical and scales that is asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant. In other words, Hashgraph achieves the fundamental best, the theoretical best you can achieve in a practical way that scales, and it achieves the bandwidth limit. So I'm going to make a really bold statement here. I understand this potentially is controversial. I think that what Lehman has done is he has solved the problem of distributed consensus. 100 years from now, there may be dozens of variants on the hash graph, but they will be variants on the hash graph because you can't do better than what's been achieved in the hash graph. This technology is implemented. We are a company that's a couple of years old. Helen mentioned she only heard about us a few months ago. We haven't been marketing. We have gone after the enterprise market to start, and we have won against major competition for the credit union industry in North America, and we'll be rolling out to the 6,000 credit unions representing 105 million members next year, early next year. And we have a full pipeline of other enterprise customers. So the point is that it's not a white paper. It's real, and it's being prepared to be rolled out.
That's fascinating developments. I think the whole marketplace is shifting, and we'll come back to whether or not these different systems can maybe at some point interoperate with each other. But I want to turn to Crystal. You've been around cryptocurrency industry a long time, and the blockchain industry. How do you see these new platforms coming on board and shaping the marketplace?
So I've just completed my ICO, so I'm in a mode of kind of feeling a little bit more relaxed. This is my 7th country in 30 days. And I'd actually really love to get to know the audience and a little bit more of where you're coming from in terms of your knowledge, just because I've been around so many different environments of crypto. Everyone from just starting in blockchain to some of the most saturated ICO markets I've ever seen. So how many people have Bitcoin? And that's basically everyone. How many people have Ethereum? And how many people have an altcoin, so anything else like EOS, Dogecoin? So this is a very, very knowledgeable audience. And how many people are a developer? Anyone coding on the system? So this is amazing. I'm just getting a sort of feeling to see if they're understanding if we need to start with what is the Byzantine generals problem, but clearly not. This is a really sophisticated place, and I'm really excited to see how packed this conference is. I'm impressed with Thailand already, and really, the industry as a whole has moved so substantially. I've been around the blockchain for now, moving on since 2011, starting in Bitcoin when my developers were mining it in my office. Very fortunate to be on the journey, and my company at its heart and soul, Sensei, is an artificial intelligence-based company. We build a communications platform. We know that the blockchain is going to radically disrupt and enable a lot of new technologies, but every industry, so from healthcare to education, but we're at the very core. So right now everyone's building the roads, and I think the protocol layers are what are going to be the foundations that we build on top of. The cars and the buildings, all of that have still yet to even be created. The applications, those layers are what's next, and those are the big opportunities. But I think sitting here, listening to the different protocols speaking, there are a lot of people that are working on attacking this problem, primarily that the transactions are too slow. we are unable to use the blockchain efficiently because it's too expensive. Ethereum gas prices are so high that even though the transactions are marginally more than Bitcoin, we just are still unable to. So we're an ERC20 token, but we have intentions of moving on to another platform as soon as they're ready. We've been on the testnet. Actually, today is the launch of the testnet of EOS. We've been on the testnet of as many of the protocols as we possibly can so that we can understand better. And I think as developers will know, this is a big challenge. You are simultaneously building your product alongside of these theoretical products that are happening. But certainly the protocols are here, and I'm really excited to hear from both of you what is the future.
Thank you, Crystal. Last but not least, we have Preethi. As I mentioned earlier, blockchain developers are in a minority, and female blockchain developers are even smaller minority, so we're very happy that she's here, and I'd love to hear about what you're working on and also the challenges that you face as a real-world blockchain engineer, what problems you come up against.
Yeah, sure. Okay, you can hear me. So I kind of want to talk about my evolution through blockchain, and it'll kind of explain why I'm so excited for the future of the protocols. So I actually started in blockchain as a VC. So I used to work at Andreessen Horowitz, and my first introduction to the blockchain was when we made the investment in Coinbase. I worked with Chris Dixon on that investment, and I was fascinated by blockchain then because I read the Bitcoin paper, and it was kind of sitting in the back of my head. But as a VC investor, I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know what to do with the blockchain, but I kind of kept it in the back of my head for a long time. And then I came back to software development, and I actually joined Coinbase as an engineer. And that's when I got much deeper into the space. And that was around 2016, early 2016. And I don't know if you remember, but like Bitcoin and blockchain was in a lull in 2016, like early 2016. Like I think the price of Bitcoin was like 300 or 400. No one was talking about it. I remember I told my friend that I'm joining Coinbase, and they're like, what is that? And I told them a blockchain company. They're like, why? Isn't the blockchain and Bitcoin dead? But I think there were a few people in the space who had like continued faith in the system, and Coinbase was one of them. And I wanted to join a group of people who were so passionate about this and the future of finance using the blockchain. But to be real, like we were at Coinbase, and the whole thing was like, where are the apps? Like the blockchain exists and Bitcoin exists, but where are the applications? Because that was the premise of why we invested in Coinbase in the first time. It's like Coinbase would be the platform, and there'd be all these applications that get built on top. But there were no applications. And then came along Ethereum. And Ethereum, I think, really kind of promoted this spirit of innovation on the blockchain because it finally made it so easy to build applications on the blockchain with these smart contracts. And it finally allowed developers to come into the space and actually build something without having to understand some of the like cryptic languages that you have to use at Bitcoin. And that's when I actually got more into the blockchain development space myself because it was just it just became a lot easier to code for the blockchain. And then because of that, then you start to see more protocols get built outside of Ethereum too. So I think like the space has continued to evolve in a very interesting way, and now you're seeing finally a lot of people kind of understand what is the blockchain, what are the limitations of the blockchain, and let's actually build a system that's future-proof, like 10 years out from now, to solve the problem of like scalability, privacy, not having formal verification of smart contracts, like governance. Like all these issues are still so open and unsolved that having this innovation finally happen this year is super exciting. And so I'm still continuing to do a lot of development and research. There's obvious challenges that we'll probably go through in this panel. And I'm working on my own project now. A little bit early to say what it is, but I'll share more in the future months.
Thank you so much. I mean, one question that comes up a lot is permissionless versus permission systems. You know, are kind of open blockchains, if you like, more likely to be successful than private enterprise distributed ledger systems? I'd love to hear the panel's comments on that.
Okay, I can start. We have chosen to make our network permissioned because we know about a lot of issues connected to privacy from governments, from enterprises. Then you say that you are going to store your encrypted data at some random PCs. Your lawyer tells you, no way. That's why we understand that, and that's why we made our network permissioned. You can buy a license, but you can buy a license only in case if you have fast hardware and broad bandwidth. Yes, for some crypto anarchists, this may sound, oh, you're not that much decentralized. But believe us, we do not control that nodes. We just control who can be node and who cannot. And after that, they are free to run our code as they like it. So we are decentralized, but yes, we are not anarchy.
Mance, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So just like there is public cloud and private cloud, because there are different use cases that are addressed by both, there will always be both permissioned networks and public networks. The use cases are different use cases. And I think that this is often sort of a false dichotomy. The public networks will support support use cases that are executed and run on permission networks or private networks, and I think that both will be around forever. I think that there are trade-offs, fundamental trade-offs that make one better than the other for different use cases.
I mean, it reminds me a bit of intellectual property debates going back some years now about open source development versus proprietary, that actually the two are not mutually exclusive, and often proprietary solutions get built once the open source development has been done, but these two kind of ecosystems do interact with each other. They're not kind of two separate silos.
They're not. They are often different markets entirely. I mean, the market for permission networks and how a company would go to market to address an enterprise use case is fundamentally different in some ways than how you would go to market to build a public platform, right? But both will exist.
Crystal, let's come to you.
For the first time in history, developers have an incentive to build on open source platforms. So I think it's important that we maintain distributed, decentralized, open platforms as much as possible, because the incentive still lies there, and that's what is truly going to enable global connectivity. It's going to be what enables access to everyone. Transparency is also enabled there. So I think as long as we can create good systems of governance and we can instill standards of self-governance and self-regulation, open systems are very good. I do see the purpose of having private systems as well, and I think governments are inherently going to want to have that forever.
Do you have a preference, Preethi, private or public blockchains?
As a secret kind of crypto anarchist myself, I'm huge into the cypherpunk movement, but so I kind of am, I'm not super passionate about the permission networks per se. All of my work and focus is on the public blockchain space, but I do think what permission or private blockchains do enable is you can constrain the problem set in a way that allows you to solve, you don't have to worry about things like scalability, because you can have every node have more compute power. You don't have to worry about things like privacy and issues that public blockchains have where you don't have control over every single node in the network. With the public blockchain, it's the wild, wild west, and you have to solve for the wild, wild west. With the permission network, you have much more control. And so I think it's a great testing environment almost, and a way to test some of the early use cases of the blockchain in some of the proprietary use cases that you were talking about. But I think for me personally, I'm much more passionate about solving the public blockchain problem.
What about the kind of environmental sustainability arguments about proof-of-work-based blockchains? Because obviously one of the arguments is the Bitcoin blockchain takes up an enormous amount of energy consumption. So do you think that these new protocols have an opportunity to address that by moving away from proof-of-work?
That's a good question. Yes, proof-of-work is a huge energy drain. I think there were stats that I don't remember the exact number, but it does consume a huge amount of energy, and that's why there's a lot of research going into other types of mechanisms to protect a completely decentralized network, things like proof of stake, which, for example, Ethereum is doing a lot of work on. And I think we will have to move to a more reliable, more efficient, more safe consensus mechanism. And you're seeing a lot of research happening in that space right now. And I think something like Hashgraph or IOTA or other types of networks that are moving away from a system where every node processes every transaction to a much more either use split the compute across different nodes or various types of scalability solutions. I think we will move to a different consensus mechanism aside from proof of work. I just don't know what it is. I don't think anyone knows what it is.
I think it'd probably be quite hard to predict at this point, but Max, do you want to come in on that point about proof of work?
Yes, I want to comment about proof of work. I think that proof of work was really great because it helped to involve many people into blockchains. You could know nothing about computing, you can write no string of code, but you can become a miner and whoops, you are involved. You are in crypto family, you are with us. But now, okay, guys, let's admit it. Now mining in what we see in Bitcoin, it's obsolete. We don't need to waste so much energy. We have far more efficient algorithms. And that's what we have done in Universa. We have no energy requesting mining. That's what probably Hans did in Hashgraph. So these are new generation systems, and they will replace mining for sure.
Yeah, I was just in Taiwan, and Vitalik was there talking about moving over to proof of stake. And there was a big conversation also about delegated proof of stake. You know, yet another model in which we can create a better efficiency. And I think this is, it'll be interesting to see how it works in the Ethereum world. And I think, you know, moving forward, everyone will start with a maybe different model. There are also other types of mining, and I think that's another thing, to your point, getting people into the blockchain space by allowing them to mine is a huge, huge lift for the entire ecosystem. Sense allows humans who have absolutely no experience whatsoever, no development experience, to mine human data, so their own data and other data without, you know, throughout the internet, and get rewards for that. And their mining is computing power. They just don't understand that the computer is doing the work.
That's a really interesting point. And I mean, some of these new platforms that are coming along, like if we talk about IOTA, we don't have anyone from IOTA here today, I don't think, but you know, IOTA is designed really to manage the Internet of Things data. There's going to be so much data coming from these different devices, and you know, it's not really feasible to do that on existing blockchains. So you know, if you've got kind of micropayments and large amounts of data coming from individuals, you know, watches or phones or other devices they're using in their house, you know, maybe we need different blockchains for different purposes. So I guess one question is, you know, with all these kind of flourishings of different systems, you know, if a company or you know, an individual decides to build something on one blockchain, what are they going to do if then they realize that they actually should have built it on something else, or they want to, you know, combine with another system? Is there going to be a way for these systems to kind of talk to each other?
First of all, we don't see the world with only one blockchain platform. There always will be several solutions for different use cases, for different purposes. And I think in the next year, if you want to build something and you want to use a blockchain as a service, you can address this issue to different platforms. You can build it on Universa, and one of the main things we are going to do next year, we are going to launch some kind of app store. It's a store where you can download predefined templates of smart contracts, predefined applications, and if you want to build application for that environment, that will be convenient to you. If you want to build something private, you may use some other. But I think that there'll never be a time when different blockchains will be isolated. All the world's leading platforms, they'll be communicating with each other. That's the future that we see.
So it's going to evolve into a marketplace where you've got sort of blockchain that might compete on speed and transaction processing, another that might compete on being able to manage data or to be customized in certain ways, or on fairness, or on another feature maybe.
So I think, I'm sorry, go ahead. So I think that what we'll see is the technology stack itself to begin to become more differentiated. So for example, you'll have a consensus layer at the bottom, and then sitting on top of that consensus layer, there will be a cryptocurrency, maybe there's storage, maybe there's smart contract technology, and I can see that each one of these components, potentially, will mature in its own right, and the market may end up coalescing around one or a few of these components. So for example, hypothetically, it might be the case that the Ethereum VM becomes the dominant VM, and even though there are other consensus layers in the market, that Ethereum VM may end up being used on top of them, thereby not eliminating all of that or obsoleting all of the scripting that's already been done on top of the VM, right? So I think that we'll see, this always happens as a market technology matures and begins to grow up, we're still very early. And if you look at the Bitcoin code base, the original code base, it's all mushed together. It's all one thing. It's a digital cryptocurrency, right? Well, it's actually a lot of logically independent components, and now those components are being split out, and the stack is being refactored, and we'll benefit from that as an industry as we move forward.
Yeah, I think 2017 is certainly the year of the ICO, and that's the top application ever created on Ethereum is the ICO. So now we have a lot of companies with capital who need to do better work with technology. So I think 2018 is going to be the year of the new chain or the protocol. And then we're going to see things emerge like Gavin Wood's Polkadot that are connecting chains together because we'll encounter that problem. The next step is, now how do we make them all talk to each other? So it's an interesting unfolding as we get this mishmash of everything together. But really, I think that a lot of people and companies that I know, including our own, are looking to the next step after Ethereum. We love and respect Ethereum for everything it's done, but in the future, when we do need better transaction power, we just have to find something else to use.
Yeah, I think I agree with you completely that the layers are going to continue to get more and more split, and you're going to have to solve each problem in a way that isn't mushed together into one fat protocol as it used to be, because that's how the web stack is today, and I think that's how blockchains will continue to evolve as well. And I think things like Polkadot or Cosmos, which creates a hub to interact across blockchains, will continually to grow more and more important because the future is multi-blockchain.
I'm sure there's people in the audience who are probably thinking, I thought there was only kind of one blockchain or one idea of blockchain I had to get my head around, and now I have to get my head around all these different types of blockchains and blockchains without blocks, and it's all very confusing. So I'm going to ask if there's any questions from the audience. We have about 10 minutes left for some Q&A. From the chap at the back there. Just wait a second for the mic.
Hello. Hi there. Justin, English. I live in Thailand. Thank you very much, guys. Maxim, that was a very good chat there. Thank you very much. How do I get my free tokens?
You can always find me in the lobby
See him at the coffee break.
I will do.
See you in 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you
Airdrop.
very much. But seriously, thank you very much. And it's really nice hearing all the technical chat. I'm not a technical guy, and hearing it in sort of layman terms, it came over very well, all four of you. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you. One right up at the back there, I think.
When are we going to be able to just airdrop tokens to everyone in the audience?
Well, I do remember people trying to give me free Bitcoin back in 2014, and I'm still grateful. So.
Yeah, hi Helen. Perlin from IOTA Foundation. So IOTA is representing.
You are here from IOTA. Great. I didn't know you were
Thanks,
here.
guys.
So welcome.
So a question to Mance. You're a patented technology. Why is that? A lot of people want to know about that.
Yeah.
We're open source, so we have nothing to hide.
Okay. Yeah.
So it begins.
So it begins. So there, people, when they think about open source, they often conflate code review with giving away a license to use indiscriminately, right? And so when and if we have a public chain, there will not be the requirement to have a license to use the network. It will be open for review, and if people want to contribute to the code base, then we would certainly welcome that. What I do see is this in the market today. What I see in the market today is a situation where we have to take advantage of every crisis in order to move the market forward. That is the definition of the Wild West, right? And it's also the reason why this is not yet mainstreamed. I mean, I don't mean to diminish the amazing achievements that have been made to date, and they are amazing, but it's not mainstreamed. And mainstream markets do care about the stability of the platform. And so where does an IP portfolio come into play as it relates to public markets? It makes it possible to do everything that we've done today, but also to give some stability in ways that are required by enterprise class customers, small and medium business customers, and makes it possible to take the whole thing mainstream, which benefits every single person in this room, right? When we have a situation where we have a benevolent dictator in Vitalik Buterin, a form of governance, but the inability to prevent the chain from being split because of the current licensing model. Or we have bicameral governance in terms of the core developers with Bitcoin and the miners, and the inability to prevent chaos in the market because now we have, just in this 1 year, 3 separate chains. That's unsustainable. That will change. And having both technical controls that enable the compelling the markets to adopt changes that are proposed and made by the governing body, as well as legal controls that don't restrict open innovation, but do provide stability that the mainstream markets need, that is the winning combination. And it has nothing to do with hiding. It has to do with moving the entire market forward.
I mean, we haven't really touched on the issue of governance. That's obviously one of the key issues in open platforms is how you actually govern open source development, and it's not easy when you've got a kind of, decentralization is great in many regards, but when the kind of decision making is also decentralized, sometimes it's hard. You get a hard fork situation or a soft fork situation, how do you quickly make a decision what to do to protect people's money? Is that something that you guys want to comment on in terms of public ledgers and governance?
Yeah. I think this is a huge, can you hear me? Okay. I think this is a huge area for us to figure out over the coming years. Like, as much as we want a completely open, public, decentralized network, in the end, it's humans coding up these networks, and it's humans deciding what goes into these networks, and it's humans deciding what changes to make to these networks. And so the governance, as much as we want to codify it and make it open, I think it still requires some group of people to make decisions of what that code involves and what that governance involves. And figuring that out is really hard, because there's one side of the spectrum where a lot of people are kind of want a completely open, decentralized way of doing stuff, and another side that wants more like private, full control over it. And we need some kind of middle ground where there's both code running the rules, and then also people decide a fair way for people to decide what code runs those rules.
Or AI. So I think if we're going to have true autonomy, then AI is the next level. When you have blockchain plus AI, that's where this really takes off. So let's talk again in 3 to 5 years and see how we extract that human layer and provide real autonomy and true decision making that has a smart contract associated with it as well.
We can talk about the rise of the bots later. We'll blow people's minds even more by getting them to understand not just blockchain but also artificial intelligence.
I want to say some words about open source projects versus projects where every God is hidden. In Universa, we are open source, but there are still some parts of our code that we hide. We will open them just in maybe a month or 2. Why do we do that? Because we understand that we are in some competition. But we have to be open source. We want it or not, we have to be, because we are building infrastructure and we need to have 100% support from community. And you can't have 100% support of community if you are not open source. That's why we made our choice in this way.
We've also, we've just recently transitioned from a venture-backed centralized company into an ICO-driven, token-modeled, decentralized company, or primarily decentralized. And it's very difficult to open up that control to the community. So while we do have an open platform now, it starts with API access, and then eventually moving on to full open. It also has IP associated with it. We do have patents, and those patents have to be opened thereby, transitioning IP to the new entities. So we're in a transitionary phase in the world. I think we're moving into a better, more decentralized world, but 100% decentralized would be absolute chaos.
Well, before we get too much into chaos, we have lunch. I just want to end by thanking the panelists. It was a privilege to chair a moderate panel where all of the panelists are far more expert and intelligent than I am. So whether the intelligence is artificial or real, it's been a pleasure, and thank you everyone for being on the panel. Look forward to seeing you after lunch.
Thank you.